Thanks to a new interview, we have a lot of information about the current state of Bethesda. And I'm very sorry to tell you, Bethesda Game Studios is now too far gone. It is beyond saving, in my opinion. The people in control of this studio, the people who have decision-making power, are either completely delusional, or they are convinced that they can gaslight us, their customers, into believing that they are making a good game. They are actively minimizing criticism. They are telling people that actually the games are good and the only people who dislike it are a small minority, and that what they have done with Starfield and specifically with Shattered Space is some of the best work that Bethesda Game Studios has ever done. And if that doesn't spell trouble for the future of this studio, I don't know what does. And all of this comes from a new interview with Emil Pagliarulo, one of the developers over at Bethesda, who was lead designer on Fallout 3, lead writer and designer on Fallout 4, and lead writer on Starfield, as well as working on all of the Elder Scrolls games from Oblivion in some capacity. Emil specifically has been a pretty controversial figure on the internet. There's been a lot of videos posted about him, deep dives into his work, and signaling him out as a problem within Bethesda Game Studios, and I'm not going to get into that because that argument gets very reductive, and I do think some of the work that Emil has done in the past is good, and I have enjoyed parts of his that he's worked on in games. But he's also the one to which they attribute the "we didn't have a design document for Starfield" quote. And the interview that we are going to look at today really does paint a picture where Elder Scrolls 6 and Fallout 5 are not something that you should trust at all. If you want to remain hopeful for those games, I completely understand, because somewhere deep down, I really want those games to be good. But after what we're going to see today, I think it's fair to say you should approach them with extreme skepticism. Because these are not the words and the attitudes of people who want to create great games. These are the attitudes of people who want to convince you that their game is great so that you keep paying them, but not actually deliver a good game. Now, I think a lot of people still have some resentment towards Emil, including myself, because of his comment saying that critics should shut up about criticizing Starfield because they don't know how a game is made, which doesn't matter from where you want to look at that, of like, if you don't know how the sausage is made, you aren't allowed to criticize it. It's one of the dumbest things I've ever heard. And look, breaking news, I guess, right? Angry man cries about people criticizing him. Oh no. But the way that in this interview he actively disregards criticism and hypes up his own work and his own games in a way that is just delusional is worrying, especially when the article is titled, "As Starfield Shattered Space launches, Bethesda reflects on the importance of players speaking their mind." The irony, you could not make this up. Now, this interview is focused on the launch of Shattered Space. I have my review up on the channel. I found it to be dreadful. I found it to be a very bad experience, a very bad value for your money, and something that I desperately hoped would be a return to form for Bethesda by limiting the scope of things by just doing a very traditional expansion was not the case. In this case, I thought I was going to come out on the very negative side of the spectrum, and it turns out that I might actually just be a little bit too positive on this expansion. And now that we have all of our ducks in a row, we have all of the context, we know who Emil is, we know why his words are important. Hi, I'm Mug, and if you're new here, welcome, and if you're not new here, welcome back. If you like this video, if you find it informative, if you find it entertaining, hit the like button. It helps the video reach more people, and that helps the channel grow. Alright, that's enough, let's get back into it. Now, this interview starts with a little quip here of Emil answering the question, what have Bethesda learned from Starfield? And what they've learned is that people really want the Elder Scrolls 6. What a surprise. I wonder if they hadn't announced that game like 10 years before they were ready to launch it, maybe that excitement would have been dialed down, who knows. But they go on to speak about how Bethesda has these unreasonable expectations placed on their shoulders before walking straight into, I think in a lot of ways, Starfield is the hardest thing Bethesda has ever done. We pushed ourselves to make something totally different, to just jam into an Xbox the biggest, richest space simulation RPG anyone could imagine. That we pulled it off makes Starfield something of a technical marvel. It's also in a lot of ways the best game we've ever made. But for us, most importantly, Starfield has its own unique personality and now sits right next to Fallout and Elder Scrolls. What? I recently made a video about hubris and toxic positivity within the video games industry, This is what I was talking about. I'm so happy that they just come out and prove my points as I make them. This entire thing here is Emil congratulating himself over what they've done, about how they tried to do something very ambitious, and although they very clearly, in my opinion and in many other people's opinion, failed, they pulled it off, and it's a technical marvel. It's like he's trying to tell us, you guys don't understand how crappy our engine is. You guys don't understand the limitations of this engine that we refuse to change. What we did with Starfield is crazy for that engine, even though it's pretty modest and not great for other people. For us, this is amazing. Guys, where are you going? Why aren't you clapping? And to call it the best game they've ever made is just... But look, it doesn't matter what your favorite is. It's not Starfield. The gall to say that Starfield as a franchise can sit next to Fallout and Elder Scrolls in the pantheon of Bethesda is just... Why can't you just accept that you screwed up and you're going to do everything possible for, in the long run, when you re-release Starfield for the 5th time with the definitive edition and the remastered pack, that maybe then there will have been enough changes that make it an enjoyable experience that is somewhat close to the things that other people like from the studio. How can you just come out and say that this is the best thing you've done? Are you insane? And he goes on to say that the discourse, the reception of Starfield, the pushback from fans against the decisions they made is proof that the studio was right to try something else, which really indicates that they don't understand what people didn't like about Starfield, that they didn't like the loading screens, that they didn't like making exploration a fast travel menu, that they didn't like how dated it felt compared to so many other RPGs. But no. What Emil focuses on here is that it might not be everyone's cup of tea, but what is? We created a new IP from the ground up and an experience that is absolutely unique on consoles. I gotta specify on consoles here. And I'm not saying Starfield is better or worse than any other game. I just said before that in many ways it's the best game we've ever made. But I'm not saying it's better or worse, guys. It's just different in what we offer. It's the weird Bethesda blend of immersion, action, and RPG. But also different to other Bethesda's RPGs. So you're saying that it's the same blend of everything that makes Bethesda games what they are, except this one has a lot of the things people like stripped out of it and substituted for things they don't like. But listen, despite it being incredibly similar, it's also different because we put in shipbuilding, and a lot of people like that. Says that Starfield is developing its own unique fan base, which seems to be a fan base that rates it and its DLC as mixed. So definitely a fan base there. And it's big and it's growing. Bethesda used to feel like the studio of Elder Scrolls. Then it was the studio you'd associate with Elder Scrolls and Fallout. But now there's Starfield, Bethesda's big three. Holy shit, man. And here's when we really start to fall into delusional territory. Any Bethesda developer who has been around since the Horse Armor days knows that by this point, if we understand one thing, it's DLC. That's not something to brag about. That's not something to make jokes about, Emil. I'm gonna give you a slight pass on this because while Horse Armor was definitely one of the reasons that we ended up in the microtransaction economy, you guys definitely tried to kick it off. You did kind of bring it slightly back when you made actual good expansions. I will give it to you that the season passes for Fallout 3, Fallout New Vegas, and kind of Fallout 4, everything has been dipping. Skyrim also wasn't the best, but you know, you guys have put out good DLC that was worth its price and that I think was good and healthy for everybody. But then you also made Creator Club and tried to sell people mods. So please, like, stop flaunting Horse Armor, okay? But he says that's not to say we're on autopilot and I don't think about it now. It means we still think about it and have probably thought about it more than any other studio since those early days. And I think the result of all that contemplating is we have a pretty good handle on how to plug new content into our huge games. Which is why they plugged in a completely self-contained area into Starfield, the game that's all about how big the galaxy is without any meaningful repercussions onto the rest of the game, and you also made it about 8 hours long for $30. Emil goes on to joke and reminisce about what they learned from Broken Steel back in 2009, mentioning that before Broken Steel, when you finish Fallout 3, the game ended, which is true, by the way, in case you weren't around, that's how it was. And he mentions that people did not like it because people don't want to play Bethesda games. They want to live in the worlds that we create. and they want their experiences to never end, and the content, whatever it is, needs to work together as seamlessly as we can make it, which is again why you have created content that is completely self-contained and in its own corner away from everything else. Yes. They then mentioned that Bethesda looked inward when developing Shattered Space, that what they wanted was to go back to something like Far Harbor. So they created a handcrafted landmass because they wanted to emulate that. I guess that they aren't going to mention just how much criticism there has been of the procedurally generated planets. And he says that Far Harbor was the real touchstone in terms of landmass size, which I'm pretty sure that's not true. I don't think that Shattered Space is as big. I haven't gone to measure it, but... And in terms of questlines and quality, and I completely disagree. I could not disagree more. Far Harbor is a much better piece of content than Shattered Space in practically every regard. Not to mention that they touch on slightly similar themes of cults, and they did a much better job with the story in Far Harbor. So great job there. And he then says, but then as happens when you have something special, the project takes on its own life. It becomes its own thing. It exists in its own pocket of awesome outside a comparison to something else. And when that happens, you have to dive in, fully committed to the vision, and your gut is just telling you it's going to be good because it was made with so much passion. I can tell how much passion there was in Shattered Space by just how overly expository all of its dialogue is to just communicate a very boilerplate and milquetoast representation of a combination of religion, occult, and politics. It is incredibly disappointing that you took the setup you put in Starfield around the Varun and made Shattered Space. That is my opinion, but that is definitely where I can feel that passion. The interviewer mentions here that Shattered Space will likely appeal to Bethesda fans who felt that Starfield's vastness lacked the depth of, say, Skyrim's towns, which I don't think that's been the case. I think that's what a lot of people like me wanted from this DLC, to just see if they could still pull that off. And what we're seeing is that they can't. And here comes just a little bit more of the gaslighting and not understanding the things that he himself claims to understand. He says that in Starfield, they broke the established formula of giving the players a giant landmass and letting them wander around and explore tons of specific handcrafted content. He says that in Starfield, you have giant landmasses and tons of handcrafted content, but not together. And that's something that people missed, that there's just as much handcrafted stuff in Starfield. We just placed it terribly and in a way that you didn't want it to be placed in. He says that for people who did not like that approach, Shattered Space is a salve, that it sits on a handcrafted landmass with oodles of bespoke content. And he says that while it doesn't change Starfield as a whole, the biggest problem of the whole thing is that it is still Starfield, by the way, it does offer this really unique place that players can go in order to get that experience, but that experience is also just not as good as the ones you guys have previously provided. Not necessarily because it's Starfield, but because it's just not as good. And he mentions that this post-release stuff is aimed at giving fans more of what they deserve. He mentions that it's been created in response to player feedback, which I guess might be the player feedback that he fabricated in his mind while ignoring all of the other things that he didn't like from the player feedback. We always have ideas, explains Pagliarulo, more than we can conceivably act on. Space is a big place, you know? But I think now more than ever, we're asking, what is the community saying? What do they want? Where do those ideas overlap? He's asking the community what they want. Not to say that the community has been screaming it at them ever since the launch. It's something that we started doing more and more with Fallout 76, he mentions. He uses this analogy of like a Venn diagram of what the studio wants to do and where it overlaps with what fans want, and that's what they go for. They did that with Fallout 76, they are doing that with Starfield, and they did that with Shattered Space. And he goes on to say, I feel great about Starfield's future. I'm excited about the stuff we're working on now and the stuff we've got coming past that. And it's insane that our mod community has already accomplished. I think we're now coming to the point where Starfield is transcending its status as a game and becoming a platform for science fiction and space content. I mean, I expected the mod community to put stuff out, but not at the rate they are. It's awesome, it's inspiring, it's everything that we hoped for. We can't wait to steal these things and pretend that they're ours as the modding community fixes our game and actually turns it into the things that they wanted, because we are incapable of providing our fans with what they want despite them screaming it to us all of the time. This is the same man that complained about people like me putting together hour-long, 2-hour-long videos dissecting every part, breaking down what works and what doesn't work, and explaining what should change. He said that we weren't allowed to do that because we don't know how games are made, and we don't appreciate the effort that goes into them. But I guess it makes sense that he praises modders because they understand the things that critics talk about, but then they go and actually fix it themselves. Those modders that do know what it takes to make a game deserve respect. But people who just write critique don't deserve to criticize Starfield, says the writer on Starfield. This is almost dystopic. This is not a studio that I trust with IP that I love. These are not people that I believe are capable of understanding what people want from them, and are also not capable of, without people's feedback, coming up with revolutionary ideas or even stealing them from other games to push these franchises forward, to push the very weird specific brand of Bethesda RPG that he's right is very, very specific to them and that people love, and pushing that forward, modernizing it, make it work with new ideas. I do not trust these people with this, and it is heartbreaking. Be careful of these people who are trying to convince you that they're making great games and that they are victims and that your criticism isn't valid, that your voice doesn't deserve to be heard while telling you that they're listening. These people are a danger to the future of the games industry, and they are the ones that are going to end up ruining things we love. These are the people that refuse to compromise and actually listen to what communities want, because I don't think that a game designed by the community would be excellent. I don't think that's the solution to problems, but I think that the community brings up incredibly valid points. They are your customers, and there's a lot of them that put in tons of effort, be that through modding or be that through in-depth critique, because there is a massive community and fan base around everything that Bethesda does. And the fact that you guys ignore that when it's an asset to look into the future and do something better, the fact that you guys instead choose to congratulate yourselves and to throw a pity party about how a technical marvel was being done with Starfield, or about how it's such a great game but people just don't like it because they're wrong, basically, because it's not their cup of tea, but those are only a minority of people, is disheartening. And I don't want this and the way that Bethesda feels right now to go by the wayside. I think people need to be aware of it, and they need to keep their expectations of this very much in check. So anyways, I've been Mug. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, remember, hit that like button, helps the channel grow. We're really close to 50K, which I didn't say it in my last video, but I'm cutting my hair at 50,000 because I never thought we would have 50,000 subscribers. So I told my girlfriend that I would cut my hair. Look, we all make mistakes, but I'm a man of my word. But it has been incredible to see all the support from you guys. Thank you so, so much. Very special shout out to the patrons up on the $1 patron wall, which keeps getting smaller, I guess. But they support everything I do. If you're interested in joining, you can check the link in the description below. As always, thank you for watching, and I'll see you again very soon.